There's a shelf somewhere in your home that tells the truth about you. A guitar with 3 months of dust on it. A notebook of half-learned Japanese. A camera you bought with real intention. A chess set. Maybe a sourdough starter that died sometime last spring. Most people look at a shelf like that and see a graveyard. Evidence of everything you quit. Your family calls it a phase. Your friends call it a hobby problem. And somewhere along the way, you started calling it a character flaw. It isn't. Psychology has a name for what your brain is actually doing, and it has almost nothing to do with discipline. Here's why this matters. If you've spent years believing you lack follow-through, you've been running the wrong diagnosis on yourself, and a wrong diagnosis leads to a wrong fix. You keep trying to force focus onto a mind that was never built to work that way. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why your mind moves the way it does, what it genuinely costs you, and the specific reason people built like this tend to become remarkable, just about a decade later than everyone else. This person exists in every family, in every era, in every culture. He's the one who spent a year obsessed with astronomy, then a year obsessed with fermentation, then taught himself to code, then bought a welding torch. She's the one with 11 browser tabs open, 4 unfinished manuscripts, and a working knowledge of Roman military history that has never once been useful at a dinner party. You know the pattern. Everything gets learned to about 70%, and then the pull just disappears. Psychologists have studied this mind for decades. In the Big Five model of personality, developed by researchers Paul Costa and Robert McCrae, this pattern maps almost exactly onto a trait called openness to experience. It's one of the most stable and most heritable traits in all of human psychology, which means this isn't a habit you picked up somewhere. It's closer to eye color than it is to willpower. We're going to walk through 7 things happening underneath this pattern. They start with the part that will make you feel understood, and they end with the part that changes how you build your entire life. Let's start with the piece almost nobody gets right. Number 1, you're not collecting hobbies, you're running a search. That distinction matters more than it sounds. A collector wants to own things. A searcher is looking for something specific and doesn't yet have the words for what it is. High openness in the Costa and McCrae framework isn't a hunger for novelty for its own sake. It's an unusually wide intake valve for information. Minds like this sample broadly before committing, the way a scientist runs small experiments before designing the big one. You aren't avoiding depth. You're gathering data on where depth would actually be worth it. So think about what you've really been doing all those years. You weren't failing to commit. You were refusing to commit blindly to the first thing that presented itself. That's not weakness. That's a filter most people never built. But the search is only the surface. What's happening chemically while you learn something new? That's where this gets genuinely fascinating. Number 2, your brain rewards the climb, not the summit. There's a reason week 3 feels electric and month 7 feels like homework. Psychiatrist Robert Cloninger identified a temperament dimension he called novelty seeking, tied closely to how the brain's dopamine system responds to new information. Here's the part people misunderstand. Dopamine doesn't track how good you are at something. It tracks how fast you're improving. In the first weeks of anything, your rate of learning is enormous, so the reward signal is enormous. Then you hit the plateau. Your skill is still climbing, but slowly, and the chemistry goes quiet. So the interest didn't die. The signal did. You interpreted a dropped reward as a lost passion, and you walked away from something you actually still loved. Here's what that looks like in practice. The moment a hobby stops being fun is almost never random. It arrives right when the beginner gains run out, usually somewhere between month 2 and month 4. If you've ever noticed that your interests seem to expire on a schedule, that's not your imagination. That's a curve. And you've been living on the steep part of it your whole life. Now here's where it gets more complicated, because this is the part most people in your position, including you, tend to get wrong about themselves. Number 3, some of the things you abandoned were actually finished. Not every unfinished project is an unfinished project. The late author and career counselor Barbara Sher spent 30 years working with people she called scanners. People who genuinely cannot stay inside one lane. Her core insight was radical. For a scanner, the goal of an interest is often not mastery. It's understanding. Once you know how a thing works, once the mystery collapses, you've extracted what you came for. Scher argued that scanners routinely treat completed learning as failed commitment and grieve things they never actually wanted. But be honest with yourself here, because this cuts both ways. Some things you left really were unfinished. Some you walked out of the moment they got hard. The skill isn't defending every exit. It's learning to tell the difference between I got what I came for and I got scared. And this next one? The people who love you get it completely wrong. Almost every time. Number 4. What reads as enthusiasm to you reads as a promise to them. Career expert Emily Wapnick coined the term multi-potentialite for people with many serious interests and no single calling. Her research on this group found the same friction everywhere. The world is built on a specialization bias. One question defines you. What do you do? One answer allowed. But the deeper damage is closer to home. When you get lit up about something, the people around you don't hear curiosity. They hear commitment. They start rearranging their picture of you around this new thing. So when the interest naturally cycles out, they don't experience a shift. They experience a broken promise, and they quietly start discounting your next one. That's why your excitement stops landing. It isn't that they don't believe in the idea. It's that they've learned not to invest in the version of you that comes with it. If you're the kind of person who wants to actually understand how your own mind works, not just be told to try harder, and you're still here with me, that tells me something about you. It would genuinely mean a lot if you hit subscribe. We put out videos like this every week. Real psychology, explained in a way that finally makes sense for real people. Now, the part that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. Number 5. The real cost isn't the wasted time. It's the identity debt. Everyone focuses on the money spent and the gear sold at a loss. That's the small bill. The large one is that you never get to accumulate a self. Organizational psychologist Herminia Ibarra studies what she calls working identity. The idea that we don't think our way into knowing who we are. We act our way into it through sustained commitment. Identity in her work is something built by repetition over time. Depth is what converts activity into a self-concept. When you cycle every 8 months, you never let that conversion finish. So you arrive at 40 with extraordinary range and no story. You can talk about anything and claim nothing. And that's the ache underneath it. It was never really about the guitar. It's standing in a room full of people who know exactly who they are and realizing you're the most interesting person there and the only one who can't answer the question. But this is the root underneath all of it. Number 6. For a lot of you, this started as a survival strategy. Look at when the pattern actually began. Very often it traces back to being the kid who picked things up quickly and getting praised for exactly that. Psychologist Carol Dweck spent decades studying what happens when children are praised for being smart rather than for working hard. Her findings were consistent and unsettling. Kids praised for innate ability become risk-averse. They protect the label. And when a task finally gets difficult, they don't push through it because struggling would be evidence the label was never true. Now, map that onto adulthood. Every new interest is the beginning phase, where you're fast, where you shine, where the label holds. The plateau is the danger zone, so you leave. Not because you're bored, but because staying means finding out you're ordinary at something. Read that again if you need to. A lot of what looks like restlessness is really an old, careful form of self-protection. Which brings us to the last one, and honestly, it's the one that matters most. Number 7. Your advantage was never depth. It's the intersection. Innovation researcher Franz Johansson calls this the Medici effect, after the Florentine family who funded sculptors, scientists, poets, and architects in the same rooms and accidentally lit the Renaissance. His argument, drawn from case after case, is that the highest value ideas rarely come from going deeper inside one field. They come from carrying a concept out of one domain and dropping it into another where nobody has seen it before. Specialists can't do that. They only have one room. You've been walking through rooms your entire life. But here's the discipline it requires, and it's the only real ask in this video. Stop switching. Start stacking. Choose 3 of your domains and refuse to let go of any of them. You don't need to be the best in any single one. You need to be in the top 20% of 3 because almost nobody is standing where those 3 overlap. That's the shift. Not narrowing yourself down to one thing, but finally letting the things you already love compound instead of replacing each other. And it's easier than the alternative you've been attempting. You've spent years trying to amputate your curiosity down to a single acceptable interest, and it has never once worked because you are fighting a trait instead of using one. Stacking asks you to keep everything. It just asks you to stop starting over. So go back to that shelf, the guitar, the Japanese notebook, the camera, the dead starter culture in the back of the fridge. That isn't a record of everything you failed to finish. It's a map of a mind that kept reaching in a world that only ever taught you one shape of success and never bothered to check whether you were built for it. You're not undisciplined. You're wide. And wide is the rarest kind of mind there is because it's the only kind that can see the connection between two things nobody thought to put in the same room. You were never behind. You were just building something that takes longer to become visible. If you want to go deeper on the mind that runs underneath all this, I made a video on why highly curious people struggle so much with boredom, and I think it will land just as hard. It's right here whenever you're ready.